He fell to his knees, the weight of his failure pressing down on him like the heavens themselves. For a long time, he didn't move. The rain drowned everything: sound, thought, hope. But then, in the silence, he heard it, the faintest pulse of his own heartbeat. Slow. Steady. Defiant. It was a reminder that he was still here. Broken, yes. Beaten, yes. But alive. And as long as he was alive, he still had a choice. He closed his eyes and remembered the faces of those who betrayed him, their smiles as they watched him fall, their voices declaring that his time was over. Those memories burned inside him like fire. Not hatred, not vengeance, just pure, unyielding resolve. They had buried him too early. They had mistaken silence for surrender. He rose. His body screamed in protest, but his mind was unshakable. Pain no longer frightened him, it guided him. Every scar, every wound was a lesson carved into his flesh by destiny itself. He no longer sought comfort, he sought purpose. He no longer chased light, he became it in the heart of the dark. The road ahead was long and merciless. The mountains in the distance looked like teeth ready to devour him, but he walked anyway. The world that had once crowned him now whispered curses as he passed. Villagers turned away, soldiers mocked him, but he did not stop. He walked through fire, through storm, through the noise of doubt, until the noise became nothing more than echoes behind him. One night, he stood before a black river, its surface reflecting no stars. It was said that this river marked the edge of the living world, a place where men turned back. He looked into its darkness and saw his reflection, hollow and scarred. For a moment, he saw the man he used to be, proud, powerful, loved. Then the image dissolved into shadow. That man was gone. What remained was something new. Something forged in suffering. He stepped into the river. The icy water wrapped around his legs, biting like blades. Every step deeper was a test of will. His breath turned to smoke, his muscles burned, but he kept moving until the river swallowed him whole. And then, in the silence beneath the current, something inside him broke, and something greater took its place. When he emerged on the other side, he was no longer the same man. The pain had not left him, it had become him. His eyes carried the weight of storms, his presence bent the air around him. The world that had once tried to destroy him had just created its greatest enemy. He looked toward the horizon. In the distance, the glow of cities shimmered like dying embers. Somewhere beyond them were the ones who had taken everything from him. But vengeance was no longer his goal. He did not want their suffering, he wanted his rise. He wanted to rebuild what was broken, not as it was before, but stronger. Real. Eternal. He began to move again, this time with purpose. The earth trembled with each step, as if recognizing the will of a man who refused to bow. The wind whispered his name again, not in mockery, but in fear. The shadows followed him, not as threats, but as allies. The storm above began to shift, not in anger, but in recognition. The fallen had risen. He reached the ruins of his old kingdom by dawn. The walls were burned, the towers crumbled, the banners turned to ash. He walked through the silent streets, where his people once cheered his name. Now only ghosts remained. Yet as he stood in the center of it all, a strange calm filled him. He realized something powerful, this was where it began. Not his reign, not his fall, but his becoming. Pain had stripped him of illusions. It had shown him who he truly was, not a king, not a warrior, but a force. A man reborn in ruin. A soul carved by fire. He knelt, placing his hand on the scorched ground. The earth was cold, lifeless, but as his fingers pressed deeper, warmth spread. The soil began to shift, glowing faintly beneath his touch. Life began to stir. Grass, faint and fragile, pushed through the cracks of stone. The kingdom that had died began to breathe again, not through magic, but through will. He smiled for the first time in years, a small, grim smile. He understood now, power is not taken from the world. It is created within. And no matter how many times the world tries to break a man like him, It only teaches him how to rise harder. He rose, turning his gaze toward the east where the sun began to pierce through the storm clouds. The light burned his eyes, but he did not look away. It no longer blinded him. It fueled him. He whispered to the wind, a promise not to the world, but to himself. They thought they ended me. A pause. They only awakened what I was meant to become. He walked forward, leaving behind the ashes of who he once was. The world would remember his name again, but not as a king, not as a fallen warrior. They would remember him as the storm that rose when hope had died. He was not walking toward redemption. He was walking toward destiny. The world had changed since his fall. Kingdoms that once trembled before his armies now thrived in the illusion of peace. His name had been erased from songs, his face from history. But beneath the calm surface of civilization, whispers had begun. Shadows moved where no light reached, carrying tales of a man who could not die, a man who had returned from ruin with eyes that burned like embers of the end. He stood at the edge of the wasteland that once was his kingdom. The ruins had shifted, reborn in strange ways since he last walked among them. Blackened stone now pulsed faintly with light. The air hummed with quiet power, the echo of his rebirth. He had not come to rebuild what was lost. He had come to finish what fate had begun. Every step he took echoed through the earth, stirring the silence into something alive. The ground beneath him, scorched and dead for years, began to crack and breathe again. From beneath the ashes, dark roots emerged, twisting through the soil like veins of power, drawn to him. He could feel it. Pain was no longer his curse. It was his command. The world had mocked him once. Now it bowed. He reached what had once been his throne hall. The roof was gone, open to a bleeding sky. Rain fell through cracks in the stone, whispering like voices of ghosts. He walked to the center of the hall and knelt, his hand pressing to the ground. Beneath his touch, the earth trembled, and black flames surged from the cracks, spiraling upward. The throne of shadows rose again, not forged by men, but by his will alone. He sat, and for the first time in years, he felt stillness. But it was not peace. It was purpose. He looked into the distance, toward the kingdoms that had turned against him. They had forgotten what it meant to fear. They had forgotten what it meant to kneel. The light they worshipped had made them weak, soft in their victory, blind in their pride. He would remind them. But not with armies, not with bloodshed. Not yet. No, his conquest would begin in silence. He closed his eyes, and his consciousness drifted outward, carried by the shadows that obeyed him. They spread across the land like smoke, sliding through cracks, slipping into dreams. And wherever they passed, people stirred in fear. Kings woke in cold sweat, their hearts pounding to a rhythm that was not their own. Warriors dropped their swords, trembling, for no reason they could name. In villages, fires dimmed. In temples, lights flickered. And far away, in their golden towers, the rulers who had once betrayed him felt something strange, an old dread rising from the depths of memory. Something was coming. By nightfall, the whispers had become legend. They spoke of a nameless wanderer cloaked in storm and silence, walking across the deadlands. They said that wherever he passed, the weak found strength and the proud felt fear. They said he did not seek vengeance, only balance, that he was the shadow born from the arrogance of light. And still, he walked. Through forests of bone and plains of ash. Through silence and through screams. He gathered no army, yet the broken followed him, men and women who had lost everything, who saw in his eyes a reflection of their own suffering. They did not ask who he was. They did not need to. They only knew one truth. Wherever he went, the world changed. When they reached the border of the First Kingdom, night was falling again. The great walls stood tall, guarded by soldiers who laughed when they saw the ragged figures approach. They saw a man in torn armor, followed by wanderers and beggars. They saw no threat, until he raised his hand. The torches along the walls flickered, then went out. The laughter stopped. The air turned heavy. The ground shook. Shadows spread from his feet like liquid midnight, crawling up the walls, swallowing the light. The guards screamed as their blades turned cold and useless in their hands. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence alone was command enough. The gates opened, not by force, but by surrender. The city was silent as he entered. People knelt without understanding why. They could not see his face beneath the stormlight, but they felt it, the truth of what he had become. Not a man, not a ghost, but something greater. A force that could not be destroyed because it had already known destruction. He walked to the center of the city square, where a monument stood, a statue of the false king who had betrayed him. He looked at it for a moment, then reached out. The stone began to crack, not from strength, but from truth. The lie it was built on could no longer stand before him. The statue shattered, scattering dust into the wind. No cheers followed. No noise filled the air. Only silence, deep, respectful, fearful silence. He turned to the people, his voice carrying across the city like thunder. They built their kingdoms on the illusion that pain ends when you bury it. He paused, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. But pain does not end. It transforms. It becomes strength. It becomes truth. It becomes me. The people bowed their heads, not in worship, but in understanding. He turned and walked away, leaving the city behind him. The broken followed once more, growing in number. But this was not an army, it was a movement. A rising storm made not of swords, but of souls awakened by pain. He walked toward the horizon, where the rest of the kingdoms waited, oblivious to the tide coming their way. He knew they would resist. He knew they would call him monster, heretic, darkness reborn. But he also knew this. The world was blind without shadow. And he was the shadow that would teach it to see again. The storm followed him now, not above, but within. And as the night swallowed the land once more, one truth echoed through the air, carried by wind and fear alike.